Well, hello to you all again and welcome back to my increasingly popular vintage motocross YouTube channel. Now, in my continuing series of looking at classic dirt bike motorcycles, this time round we are going to take a browse at a very nice looking 1989 KX 125 Kawasaki. Now, of course, these 1989 Kawasaki's were no fire breathers, but it was still a very fine little racing machine. It had excellent suspension, crisp handling and an easy to ride power band, which made it a great entry level off-road bike for fast, intermediates and professionals. Although if you were racing this little screamer, some serious motor work was going to be needed to keep the other manufacturers in your sights, because this little 125 had to work very hard to keep up with the other big three of Suzuki, Yamaha and Honda. But despite that, these 1989 machines were very good bikes in their day, and this model was a completely redesigned version of the previous 88 Kawasaki. Now, of course, for the 1989 125 Kawasaki, they were still using their tried and trusted steel frame at this time. The front forks were also beefed up and the steering angle was increased slightly to make the bike turn a bit quicker. Now, originally in 1989, all new KX 125s were supposed to come equipped with Kayaba's new 41mm cartridge forks, but at the last minute Kawasaki pulled the plug on that idea and opted for the stronger 46mm conventional Kayabas. Now, the motors on these little KX 125s were good workhorses, but you had to keep that little two-stroke motor buzzing to get the best from it. Now, for this 1989 bike, Kawasaki tried to pump up the top end without changing the excellent mid-range power that this little bike was so famous for. Now, this 89 motor had a full 2 horses more than the previous 1988 model. But of course, Kawasaki still continued with the very unique version of the two-stroke power valve named the KIPS system, which of course was an abbreviation for their Kawasaki Integrated Power Valve System. Now, as we all know, by the early 1990s, nearly all the big manufacturers started using their very own version of this Kawasaki Integrated Power Valve System. Now, although by 1989 Kawasaki turned their punchy little 125 into a very quick stroker that pulled over a broader range but lacked any kind of hit or burst of quick power. Now, riders often commented at the time that although the bike was certainly easy to ride, it was pretty boring to race and was not the most popular of bikes with most riders. Now, riders were opting to go for the more raw, immediate power surge that they got from riding their RM Suzukis or YZ Yamahas. Now, on the intake side, the bike had a 6-petal carbon fibre reed valve, which fed a 35mm crescent slide carb. Now, the bike also had an electronic ignition with a large capacity airbox with a rotary valve shutter. Now, a new seat was added by Kawasaki for 1989, and this would have been of course blue in colour and not red, as seen here on this particular example. Now, of course, one of this little bike's plus points was this excellent unitrack swing arm suspension layout. Now, the front had Kayaba forks, which were good, but the rear Kayaba shock, the linkage and the excellent geometry all combined to offer a smooth ride that was very predictable and never surprised anybody who was in the pilot's seat. Although to be truthful, this Unitrack system was cutting edge at the time, and only Suzuki came a close second to this type of system. Now also for the 89 model, the 125 had a dual piston Nissan caliper, which was adequate for the time, but the competition appeared to have better brakes on their particular machines. Now although this 89 Kawasaki KX 125 was a decent little bike, it still wasn't without its problems. Now one or two of the things that used to give trouble were of course the foot pegs, which again were not strong enough, and after heavy use their mounts would start to droop, and the return springs would also break on a regular basis. Now of course one of the other little problems was that you had to take care when you were tightening things up, like seat bolts and silencers and side panels, etc. as well, because the captive nuts that were welded onto the frame were very easily stripped. Now the frames also occasionally cracked, and you had to be very vigilant when you were doing your inspections, just in case a more serious event happened while racing on the racetrack. Now the green plastics were another source of misery for 1989 125 owners, with riders always complaining of dodgy gas caps and front and rear mudguards that were prone to cracking or fracturing. But nevertheless, this little KX 125 was still a very decent little machine, and if you could get the right rider on board who was prepared to dance on the gearbox and work that throttle very hard, you could still attain some very good results. But although the motor lacked outright top-end power, it was the suspension on these little KX 125s that really made the bike. Nevertheless, although the little KX 125 was not the best bike on offer at the time, it was still a very fine little racing machine. The bike, as I said earlier, had excellent suspension, it had very crisp handling, and a power band that just seemed to go on forever. But she was certainly not a bike for your hard charging rider who had to have instant power delivery when he snapped back that twist grip. Okay, the bike, as with all other comparative competitors' machines, they all had their good points and bad points, but nevertheless this was still a decent little motocross machine, and it could take you to some very decent results if you were prepared to work that little 125 engine. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this very brief look at this 1989 KX 125 Kawasaki. Now many more of these machines similar to this are scheduled to appear on my YouTube channel very soon, so please subscribe or just continue to browse my channel for more of these iconic classic dirt bikes. So anyhow, I do really appreciate the time you've taken to view this little video. So thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you soon.